pregnant woman dies in Queen Elizabeth Hospital after undergoing labor induction. The observatory says the chance of the strong wind signal number 3 tonight not high.
Good evening. A pregnant woman died in Queen Elizabeth Hospital yesterday after undergoing labor induction. Her newborn baby remains in serious condition. The hospital has reported the death to the coroner. Caleb Leung has more.
It all started when a 24-year-old woman went to the hospital for a regular prenatal checkup. She was diagnosed with problems including no amniotic fluid, and the doctor arranged her to undergo labor induction. At 38 weeks of pregnancy, the woman was admitted to the hospital on Friday morning. Hospital staff used medication to induce labor. Both the woman and the fetus were in stable condition at the time. The woman suddenly developed short duration of seizure at 10:30 p.m. and cardiac arrest a few minutes later. Medical staff immediately performed CPR on her and delivered the baby 15 minutes later with an emergency cesarean section. The patient died early yesterday morning. The baby is now in serious condition and remains under intensive care. Sources said the woman was giving birth for the first time and had no history of pregnancy-induced high blood pressure. A doctor said one possible cause of death is that the amniotic fluid has entered the woman's bloodstream.
When the uterus contracts, the amniotic fluid can get into the vessel inside the uterus and then enter the blood circulation system of the mommy, and then go into the brain, go into the heart, go into the lung. And that sort of things will make mommy loss of consciousness, convulsions, or sometimes sudden death.
Case was reported to the coroner. The hospital will also set up an investigation panel, which is expected to complete its report in 8 weeks. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Standby signal number 1 remains in effect. However, the observatory says the chance of issuing the strong wind signal number 3 tonight is not high. In Macau, the wet weather has resulted in some flooding. Kana Chu has more.
A tropical depression affecting Hong Kong strengthened into a tropical storm this afternoon. The amber rainstorm warning was also issued at around 5:15 a.m. but was cancelled about 90 minutes later. The storm is forecasted to move slowly, lingering around the coastal area of western Guangdong. The associated rain band is expected to bring Hong Kong occasional showers and strong winds in the next couple of days.
The rain band associated with the tropical storm is affecting our territory. So the weather forecast for tonight and tomorrow, it will be mainly cloudy with occasional squally showers and a few thunderstorms.
Meanwhile, in Macau, the signal number 3 and the blue storm surge warning remain in effect. This morning, there was flooding at the inner harbor area. The place saw seawater spill onto roads, and the authorities expect the flooding to continue over the next few days. Kana Chu, TVB News.
There seems to be never-ending news about the subsidence problems with the MTR Corporation's Sha Tin to Central Link project. Head of the LegCo Subcommittee on Matters Related to Railways explains what authorities should clarify in a special meeting later this month. Sharon Tang tells us more.
This is the To Kwa Wan construction site where 23 nearby buildings and a number of gas pipes were found to have sunk over the acceptable limits. Over to the future exhibition center station, excavation works were suspended after subsidences were detected. That's just 2 out of 10 MTR stations of the future Sha Tin to Central Link. Will there be any more? Speaking to TVB News, lawmaker Michael Tan said the MTRC has pledged to reveal the exact number of sinking problems at all 10 stations. Though he noted that subsidences caused by piling works are common, there are double standards between MTRC works and other non-rail development projects.
In the case of other development affecting MTR station, the buildings department have an official mandate, to halt construction immediately. When it comes to MTR building the station, creating subsidence of regular building around them, they can actually report the situation to government and continue to excavate.
Tan added that's bound to be a main topic of discussion during the subcommittee's special meeting on August 31st. Another key question would be about the ways certain standards and limits for sinking levels were set up.
If a whole building subside, let's say 50 millimeter, the situation is actually not alarming compared to another building where one corner subsided 30 and the other three corners have no subsidence. That's actually even a bigger problem. How will they come up with some kind of a objective standard where the public can digest?
As for the steel bars that were cut short at the Hong Kong station, Tan suggests recording the performance of the workers on site to ensure safety. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The president of Turkey is blaming his country's economic downturn on the United States and other nations. Speaking to supporters, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said dollars, euros, and gold are the bullets being used to wage a war against Turkey. In order to protect their economy, Erdogan plans to trade through national currencies with China, Russia, and Ukraine. This comes one day after the ailing Turkish lira crashed to a record low. That happened after U.S. President Donald Trump doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from Turkey.
3 Chinese engineers were among 6 people injured from a suicide bomb attack in Pakistan. The trio were aboard a bus heading from Baluchistan to Karachi when it was attacked. 3 paramilitary officers were also injured. The Baluch Liberation Army, a separatist group, claimed responsibility. The group issued a statement on its website. It said more attacks will be carried out on Chinese involved in exploiting the resources of Baluchistan. Separatists want a greater share of the region's resources and also autonomy from Islamabad. In a separate incident in the country, gunmen killed 3 police officers overnight. 2 other officers were injured in that attack.
4 members of Jordan's security forces were killed on Saturday when they raided a militant hideout rigged with explosives. This was the scene after the raid when assailants opened fire and set off explosions. Officers were searching for suspects involved in a bomb attack on a police van on Friday. 1 officer was killed then. The country's prime minister called the bombing a terrorist attack. Authorities have detained 5 people following the subsequent raid. Jordan's military said the assailants involved on Saturday were also planning attacks on security installations and sensitive targets. The bodies of 3 suspected militants were retrieved from the collapsed building Sunday morning.
Anti-corruption protests continued for a second straight day in Romania. About 40,000 people gathered in front of government offices in the capital of Bucharest. Saturday's demonstrations were peaceful, and the previous day clashes with police injured more than 400 people. Protesters say the ruling Social Democrats are corrupt. They want their government to step down and hold a new election.
And still ahead in our newscast, a rowdy scene in Chim Sa Choi last night sparks renewed calls for regulating street performances. Nobel Prize-winning author V.S. Naipaul dies.
想打好個檸檬茶底，就要將阿薩姆紅茶、伯爵茶、石蘭紅茶撞埋一齊，就係 Fuji 3重茶底檸檬茶，全新手糖3種甜度任你揀。
Welcome back. More performers began popping up in Chim Sa Choi after the Mongkok pedestrian zone was scrapped. That sparked discussions on whether street performances should be regulated. Christy Lung has that story.
After the Mongkok pedestrian zone was abolished, the show goes on in Chim Sa Choi. Some performers have found their new stages near the waterfront, but not everyone is pleased. Last night, dozens of protesters went to the Star Ferry Pier trying to drive away the buskers. Demonstrators accused the performers of being too noisy and described them as beggars breaking the law. It led to a standoff and police officers stepped in to escort some performers away.
On previous weekends, the Star Ferry Pier is packed with street performers, but as you can see from our video, it's rather quiet this afternoon.
A Yau Chun Mong district councillor said he had received about a dozen noise complaints in recent days. He thinks a licensing system is needed to regulate street performances.
It can giving the message to the street performer. They need to control their voice and they need to control their side. Then will be better than now because the street performer, they do not have any regulation and they cannot follow.
However, some found this idea not practical.
It's very difficult to judge which performers are suitable. It's very difficult to measure the audio level. Perhaps the environmental department can have some professional judgment, but they can't do it every weekend or every time, so it's not practical.
Despite calls for a special meeting on the matter, he found it unnecessary at the moment, adding that he would keep an eye on the issue. Christy Leung, TVB News.
A mysterious morning car crash. A damaged KMB bus was found abandoned in Tai Po with no one inside. An initial investigation suggests the bus was stolen in Shengshui. The culprit then took it for an 8-kilometer joyride and hit a roadside pillars and electric boxes before colliding with 2 other vehicles. No one was arrested. Earlier this year, another KMB bus was also damaged in a car crash after being stolen. A unionist says anyone can easily start the bus engine using a hidden switch, but it's also hard to add security features as the button will also be used during emergencies.
Giving hope to the blind and people who have suffered eye injuries. According to the hospital authority, there was a record number of cornea donations last year. 2017, there was a total of more than 250 cornea donation cases. They provided for transplants to nearly 300 patients. That shortened the waiting time for those in need to roughly about a year. Secretary for Food and Health, Sophia Chan, said the donated corneas will be used by the whole of Hong Kong, including in private hospitals.
Nobel Prize-winning author V.S. Naipaul has died at the age of 85. The British author was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2001. His literary career began in the 1950s and spanned half a century. During that time, Naipaul was hailed as one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. He was praised for his creativity in his novels, A Bend in the River and In a Free State. But he won worldwide fame in 1961 for A House for Mr. Beeswax. Naipaul was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1989.
And from all of us, thanks for joining us.
Bye for now.